Good evening once again. I'm Stephanie Ruhle. We are now 235 days away from the election, and you're in luck because tonight we have got a very special nightcap we're going to get to in just a moment, featuring an amazing lineup of student journalists. But first, we got to break down some news of the day, starting with Fulton County DA Fani Willis. She will remain on the Trump-related Georgia election interference case. Today, a judge ruled that she could stay if Nathan Wade, the special prosecutor Willis had a relationship with, stepped down. Hours after the judge's decision, Wade, in fact, did just that. Here's my colleague Blaine Alexander with more.
He was front and center when Fani Willis announced her criminal indictment of Donald Trump. But tonight, Nathan Wade, the man leading the prosecution against the former president for allegedly trying to overturn Georgia's 2020 election results, has resigned. The culmination of a months-long spectacle after one of Trump's co-defendants, Michael Roman, exposed a romantic relationship between Wade and Fulton County DA Fani Willis, who hired Wade on the case. Roman accused Willis of financially benefiting from her relationship with Wade after the two went on vacations together while working the case. In a ruling today, Judge Scott McAfee said while he did not find an actual conflict of interest in the case, he did find a significant appearance of impropriety that infects the current structure of the prosecution team and gave Willis an ultimatum. Either she and her office leave the case or Wade. In a letter, Wade writes today he's resigning to move this case forward as quickly as possible. For Willis, today's ruling is a legal victory, but a professional blow following this stunning 2-hour testimony.
It is a lie. It is a lie.
Judge Scott McAfee scolding what he called her unprofessional manner on the stand. And while not dismissing the case outright, as the defense had asked, McAfee takes Willis to task over, quote, this tremendous lapse in judgment. Tonight, Trump's attorney, Steve Sadow, says he will use all legal options available as we continue to fight to end this case.
With that, let's get smarter with the help of our leadoff panel on this Friday night. NBC News Washington correspondent Yamiche Alcindor joins us. Luke Broadwater, Pulitzer Prize-winning congressional reporter for the New York Times, and Harry Litman, former U.S. attorney and former Deputy Assistant Attorney General. Harry, let's start with you. Fani Willis stays on the case. What are your big takeaways?
That's number one takeaway. But the number two takeaway is she really absorbed some real haymakers from McAfee, and that's not going to go away. McAfee and she together have given Trump and company, Scott Sadow, but Georgia Republicans in general, it's a real mixed brew of politics down there, a club to beat her with, and they're going to continue to do so. So you may have the feel from the opinion that it kind of puts this to rest. I don't think it does. And I think we're going to continue to hear Trump and others shouting from the rooftops about the sound bites that McAfee has supplied. Man, odor of mendacity, not a phrase you want to hear or read about yourself in a judge's opinion.
Then, Harry, do you agree with Andrew Weissman? Even though she can stay on, she should consider voluntarily recusing herself to just get all this noise out of the case?
Did he say that? He is one smart guy. And the truth is, I do. Look, if you think about it from the vantage point of the case, I'm not faulting her professionally. She's done an excellent job with the case, and a lot of this is unfair and at least overplayed from what she's done. But if you want to say what's best for the case now, removing herself from it would be best for the case now. I know a lot of people will think that's unfair, and maybe is unfair, but if the focus is on moving the case forward, yeah, it would be better off. She could stay in the chair, but turning it over to her staff to handle and staying up outside of it, I think would be the smartest move. I agree with Andrew.
Yamiche, what are you hearing out of Trump world tonight? We just heard from Blaine Alexander. Trump's lawyer said he will be staying on this, all over this. I'm guessing they're already raising money off of it.
Well, of course, this is a split decision. You have the vision of impropriety. And let's remember, like, as much as this is a legal argument, and this is a split decision legally, when it comes to the politics, it's really does this look bad? And the Trump campaign is essentially saying, look, this is a win for us in that this looks as though Fani Willis did something that was at least not smart, directed on a case that is, of course, dealing with the former president. So in their case, in the Trump world, and of course in the former president's mind, this looks like something to say we can rally people around this. We can say this is part of a big witch hunt. We can say that this is a woman who was at least unprofessional at best, and at worst unethical. Of course, they're going to continue to call her unethical. That's not what the judge said. But I think when you look at the ruling, and especially when there's that part that says she was a lapse in judgment, essentially, for her to have Nathan Wade on this case, it really just plays to this idea that she's not the best person for this case. Of course, again, when it comes to legally, she can stay on this case, and Trump world can continue to say, well, she's someone who should not be leading this case. But it is, I think, I think in some ways the politics here really almost outweigh the legal findings here, which is that she can stay on the case. If you're a politics and you're thinking about this from the lens of that, this just doesn't look good.
All right, Harry, new topic. Today, the judge in the hush money trial here in New York delayed the case by a month. What do you make of this situation? It seems like almost everybody associated with it is frustrated.
Yeah, and starting with the judge. Look, the number one issue, Steph, is how much time does Trump need to process these new papers? That's a straightforward question that really doesn't have anything to do with how this all happened. And that really, it seems to me, there seems to be a little bit there, but not a lot. 30 days should do it. But obviously the judge is hot and bothered about this, thinks maybe the U.S. Attorney's Office, maybe the DA wasn't totally above board. I don't know. There are good reasons that the SDNY could have withheld the request, which is what they first got from the DA's office before responding to the subpoena from Trump. But he wants to get to the bottom of it, and he's obviously peeved. I think, though, that really should give way. The question before him should be, what does Trump now need for due process to process the new stuff? And that should be the focus. And I think a month, from what we know, ought to do it.
Today sounds like annoyed judges Friday. Luke, the general election campaign is now fully underway, and all 4 of Trump's criminal cases are delayed for a variety of reasons. What does it all mean for November?
Right. And so, my view is that potentially if some of these cases are not resolved, which it looks like some of them may not be by the time we get to the election, that's really a loss for the voters, because the voters do not have the ability to analyze all the evidence in all these cases. There's just too much information. So they do need the juries and judges to do that for them. And so we're going to go into an election where we don't know whether a potential new president will be guilty or innocent of the crimes that he is alleged to have committed. Now, that's the situation Donald Trump wants. He wants to delay. He wants to be elected president again. He can then move to get rid of the federal cases, and there are heightened protections for presidents from criminal prosecution. So that's in his interest. But the voters will be going in sort of blind as to whether or not Donald Trump is in fact guilty of these crimes, and will have to make a decision with limited information.
But Luke, are they blind? Do you really see a voting bloc out there that are thinking, well, I think he's guilty, I think he's corrupt, but I'm not quite sure, and I need a court decision to really help me decide one way or another? You really think there's voters out there in that camp?
Well, there aren't a lot of these voters, okay? But there is some limited polling that shows that a conviction would move a small amount of the electorate. Now, I agree with you that most people are really locked in on Donald Trump, that he's either a really bad guy or he's some sort of hero. But there is some small portion of moderate and swing voters who a conviction could affect their votes, or an acquittal. But I do think, just generally speaking, it's to everyone's advantage to have the facts looked at and vetted by impartial people, by judges and juries, and to really hear, were these charges legitimate? Is he guilty in New York? Is he guilty in Georgia? Is he guilty in federal court? Or were these bogus charges? So, I think most people probably have an opinion on that, but one thing I've learned from covering courts over the years is there's nothing like a real good vetting of the evidence in a trial to really get to the bottom of the truth.
For sure. All right, here's some different news, Yamiche. Today, Mike Pence, Trump's former VP, went on Fox News and said very clearly that he would not support his former boss. Let's take a look.
It should come as no surprise that I will not be endorsing Donald Trump this year. Donald Trump is pursuing and articulating an agenda that is at odds with the conservative agenda that we governed on during our 4 years. And that's why I cannot, in good conscience, endorse Donald Trump in this campaign.
Yeah, logically, it's not a surprise. But when you think about the fact that Tim Scott, Ted Cruz, Mitch McConnell have all lined up for Trump, and Mike Pence, he was his former VP. That's pretty big, don't you think?
It would be big if this was a conventional sort of political situation. But Mike Pence was running for his life in the Capitol with a crowd of people who were shouting, "Hang Mike Pence," because, and it's pretty clear, former President Trump had really turned their attention and their anger toward him because he would not steal the 2020 election on behalf of Trump. So I don't think it's that surprising when you think of the set of facts that Mike Pence is having to deal with, apart from the policy decisions that and the policy differences that they may have. You have Mike Pence, who I think is personally still dealing with the after effects of Donald Trump turning on him. And let's remember, Mike Pence was a very loyal vice president. He was someone who there was no daylight between him and Donald Trump publicly for years and years and years, even as Trump did all sorts of things that were scandalous, all sorts of things that just looked like Mike Pence would naturally disagree with them. But when it came to stealing an election, that was where Mike Pence finally found the sort of straw that broke them camel's back and could no longer support him.